All right. Hello, everybody. This is Lex Nepomuceno with Andy Cook, and we're talking association upgrade and this week. And we're now streaming to the Facebook group for the CSRA, which is Council of State Restaurant Associations. And this will only be about 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes at the most. But we wanted to kind of check in on a weekly basis to see if there's any of you out there that have any questions regarding communications. Andy was on my staff for a long time, and then he moved on to work at Harbor Foods. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background, Andy?
I've been marinating in the restaurant industry for years, just about every position, like so many other people. I needed to express that in new ways, and Lex chose me to join his communications team, years ago, back in the before times. And I got a great opportunity to be exposed to the industry in a lot of really cool and creative ways, being on the communications team at the Washington Hospitality Association. And now I am more of a hands-on frontline restaurant consultant with a broadline distributor.
Hey, we're joined by Suzanne from CSRA. Hi, Suzanne. We've got I don't know if you've ever met Andy Cook. You may have talked before for previous CSRAs, but
maybe.
Yeah, but we wanted to just kind of give this an opportunity, a little bit different venue. I'm using a platform called StreamYard, and Andy and I did a podcast on this last week where we realized we just talk a lot about industry-related things that could be helpful to other people, tools, technologies, resources, and they said, why don't we just share our conversation with everybody else so that they can ask us questions or learn from what we have to say. So that's why we did this whole thing, Suzanne. So
Great.
So how is everything at the national front with CSR? How are you doing, and how's the organization doing?
Yeah, it's doing well. So Andy, to give you an update, CSRA, it's a mouthful, Council of State Restaurant Associations. So we represent the 50 state restaurant associations plus DC and Puerto Rico. And like everybody, we had a pivoting year. And what that meant for us was we moved to everything virtual. Both of our, one conference was moved to this year, one was virtual, and it was done at about 3 days' notice to move to virtual. We love Zoom, so I'm eager. Lex always does great things, forward-thinking technology. And so I'm eager to see what this is like. We've been using Zoom. I guess the other piece is states are now really knee deep or elbows deep, whatever, into PPP and the new relief package. And that's what's kind of happening at the state level. So we're sharing a lot on that. And we're getting ready for the year, getting our committee set up and ready to dive in and welcome 2021 and put 2020 back in the rearview mirror where it belongs.
Susan, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
For my own edification, the way that you described, I think 52 different regions that you coalesce around. How do you manage advising or supporting such a broad application from state to state for how each state is responding to COVID-19?
Well, it's a really great question. I've never met such a group that is open and willing to share with each other. In theory, they do have the same role, but they're different states, so they're not competitors, and there is immense sharing of data. So if there's something that is happening today somebody was looking for legislation examples. So I just send it out to those who I know have worked on it, tell them I'm sharing it with the requesting state, and they're very willing that way. I think also it varies. Certain regions are maybe more progressive or just have different issues happening at the state level in maybe progressive areas or more conservative in other areas. And because of that, we tend to have regional groups and discussions. So there's a lot of sharing that way. Lately, everybody's looking at vaccinations, for example, and what group are restaurant workers in your state? And so we're looking at that. So, it's, I would say, a lot of discussions, a lot of sharing.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today was the different platforms and vehicles people are using for remote communications. Mm-hmm. I know you use Zoom quite a bit, but I also know you use other tools. Today we're using something a little bit different, which is more of a broadcasting mechanism as opposed to a collaborative one like Zoom is. But what are some of your observations that you've found with using the different tools? What has worked? What has not worked?
So I have strictly used Zoom, but I'm going to tell you I'm on a number of state broadcasts, and so they may do it. They'll do a combination. For example, they'll do Facebook Live, but it'll be Zoom streaming through there. Does that make sense? I mean, Alex, you're the guru of all this, so I'm going to look to you. And I think too, I work with these states and they're phenomenal. They do a great job. They're also not for profits. So Zoom has been a really useful tool for everybody because it's so affordable. And I think also everybody is comfortable using it. So you're not reteaching people. If I go outside, I work with a number of companies that work with the states, and they'll use Teams or GoToMeeting. And so I've seen that as well, but I guess that's probably just more the webinar platforms.
Yeah. Andy, from a member perspective, what have you seen out with, I'm sure Harbor Foods is, you have to have meetings with restaurants and hotels. What have members been using most of the time?
Yeah, so at Harbor, we use Microsoft Teams, but we have to adapt to the needs of our clients. And I think that Zoom has become a verb like Google. And so,
yeah.
And so that is sort of the most comfortable space that a lot of people will have. Whether it's the best one or not is besides the point. It's the one that's most accessible. And so I found myself in the Zoom environment outward facing probably more than any other one, but sometimes it's Google Meet. I had one that kind of took me way back to the day where it was a Skype meeting, but Zoom is definitely the leader of the pack. And so I've become comfortable in that environment too. I've just worked on how do I use this communications platform? What changes do I make to be a better communicator in technology or in etiquette and things like that? So that's sort of the learning curve for me, and what I've seen a lot out there in the industry is people getting their cameras right and getting set up and knowing what they're doing while they're doing it instead of trying to build the car as they drive it.
In terms of broadcasting platforms for either of you, have you seen more people? I know that, Suzanne, we had a previous one of these webinars talking about podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen an uptick in podcasting? And same thing with you, Andy. Have you seen an uptick in podcasting from members and from folks in the industry? I guess we'll start with Suzanne.
Sure. I've seen an interest in it. I've sent our podcast archive to a number of states. It was extremely well done. I think that there's still, sometimes it's a resource question at the states. They want to do it. It's repackaging what they already have. It's just right now with limited resources and so much attention being focused on moving the industry forward that it's there. It's not on fire, is what I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree that it is there, and something that's kind of gotten in the way of it is there was, the first few months, everybody wanted to do a podcast all of a sudden. And at the same time, a lot of us were trying to adapt to a lot of these remote meetings. And so microphones, like good microphones, are almost impossible to get for a while. Same thing with webcams. And that seems, supply seems to have caught up to demand. But the same issue that existed before this existed in it, even though people had more time. There was so many more options to choose from, and to find out what was most valuable to them has been, I think, the hardest nut to crack. There's so many more selections to choose from. How do you find the one that's going to give you the most value?
Yeah, what I've been finding for me is we're trying to get value from all the videos and all of the different things that we're generating. I don't think it's going to be enough in the long term for people to say, hey, we had so many people download our podcast, or how many people viewed our YouTube video. That's good for now, but I think as the industry evolves, associations communicating with members, and the industry itself, I think we're going to start seeing a greater demand for a little bit more sophistication in how all this stuff is handled, which is one of the reasons why I'm looking at this platform. So I'm looking at StreamYard. Basically, what we're doing here is we are it's a live stream, and this is with the intention of trying to get people to view it in a live environment, and it'll be permanently up on the CSRA feed where people can make comments on it, collaborate on it. And the idea here is to do this maybe on a weekly basis, where we can say, hey, for 15, 20 minutes, we're going to have this thing, and you're going to have an opportunity to ask us questions if you like. And if they miss it, well, that's okay, but at least it promotes collaboration and community within that group. I can see this being a big thing for associations as you struggle to have dialogue with your members. It's not the same. You can't just go to the restaurant anymore and say hi and talk to them. This might be one of those replacements that might do that. So if you had a regular session, what I find is a lot of members, there's a lot of demand for a lot of questions that are changing on a daily basis. And while it's fine to do that over email, I think this is a much more dynamic environment that encourages better back and forth.
Yeah, I have a question at that point. Oh, go ahead, Suzanne.
No, I was going to say, what I'm finding is there's not a lack of information to share among our people, as I mentioned to you, Andy. Time is the crunch. I mean, everyone's email box is flooded. So I think if you have something like this and they say, oh, hey, look, Lex and Suzanne were talking, and who's this guy, Andy? And so you get people to listen to it, and they can put it on as they're doing their weekend chores or that sort of thing. Everybody's kind of at the home base right now. So they've got time, and resources like this are handy. I think you've got them on there. I'm eager to see how this works, because it looks very cool from my perspective, talking to both of you now.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I liked about it is people are getting sick, and I guess it's understandable, of just a typical Zoom environment, right? As much as functional as it's been like Kleenex, right? There's nothing, it's Kleenex without the prints, right? And so, here we're trying to, if you're noticing with this, we can change the perspective. It almost looks like a little CNN little mini broadcast, if you will. And the nice thing about that is, again, that's where I think a lot of our members and a lot of our colleagues are going to be demanding a little bit more quality, where they say, you know what, I really want to watch this thing because it's actually fun. They're doing screen sharing. They're doing all these types of things. But one of the nice things about this is I can dynamically share a screen with, let's see, I'm just going to click on one thing. So I'm sharing a screen here, and we can all see like the, me going through here, or I can pull up the, WA Hospitality website, and then we can just kind of go through this narrative. I can say, hey, this is some of the stuff that we're going through now, and this is how we deal with this. And it allows us to really just, allows us to have a more interactive way of just sharing information, I guess is kind of what we're trying.
Yeah, when we have a screen and we have an opportunity to not just tell but show, and there's a lot of ways to tell a story and communicate, and I think our human brains are just naturally default to what can we learn with our eyes. So I agree. Lex, I have one question before we get too far away from it. Sorry, Suzanne, but I just really want to know, you've been producing a lot of live webinar timely content pieces throughout the pandemic, and I've worked with you, and I know that you don't just send them out there and then let them fly away. You always circle back to see what the numbers look like. What are the differences when you put out these communication pieces between live participation and post participation, like people downloading and viewing the webinar after the fact? How are those numbers been shaken out for you?
Well, in terms of a good example is like with Anthony's latest CEO podcast, I think we had close to 50 people attending live on that. And we had just in a couple of days, we had a couple dozen downloads. So we're looking at, overall engagements can be anywhere from 100 up for just a typical monthly podcast. The way we're, and I was just talking with Anthony about this, one of the ways that we try to justify some of these efforts is we no longer do a print magazine. And I know a lot of CSRA members are no longer doing print magazines for budget reasons or for whatever. And we were saying, okay, how we calculate a win in our case, or value to our members, is if Anthony wrote a column, how many people would have read it, and then versus Anthony doing a podcast, how many people are downloading it, and then when we looked at it, it's very comparable numbers. And the nice thing is, and Andy, you remember, putting together a magazine takes a lot of time and it's extremely expensive. With webinars, you just have to be creative. You have to have good content, and you have to really stick with it. Consistency is going to be key. That's why, it was over the holidays, it was a challenge because of the holidays. But, if your organization can do these things on a weekly, monthly basis, I think it will be tremendous value to your members. And here's the factor that people don't consider with these videos is this is evergreen content, additional value that you could repurpose later on. So let's say you wanted to do an online class, for example, talking about, how to do social media for the industry, right? And you have 5 webinars that deal with that topic. Well, if you repurpose those things, you could actually segment those things into different lessons and modules that you could turn into a class. If you have a members only website, you could plug them in there, and all of a sudden there's immediate value to your members. Like, hey, a social media instructional class of this nature might cost $500. Well, there's your membership dues, right? So there's so many ways you can go there. I also repurpose the content too, where we rewrite it and then we post it up. So there's just
Right.
2 ways to do this.
So Lex, I'm going to jump in with the question because this will come up from the States. Can we talk about cost with this?
Okay. Well, a platform like StreamYard or Restream, or I think there's another one called Melon, which is done by Streamlabs, who does OBS Studio. For those of you who are streamers, you're familiar with OBS Studio. The range is anywhere from $20 a month to sky's the limit, right? So in this case, let's say if you just wanted to get a baseline thing getting started, you could probably get something for, $20 a month where you could do kind of what we're doing now. That doesn't include obviously the hardware, but this lavalier mic only cost me $30.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the high-tech setup that Andy has with his fancy microphone there. And then you just need some base lighting. And in my case, I just strategically place lighting, and I know Andy, you use your monitors really effectively. So there's a lot of things there. So from a cost perspective, it doesn't have to. You could literally get the whole thing going for easily less than $1,000, and that's kind of already set, even less than that. So, Andy, am I missing anything there?
No, not really. Squadcast is another online tool, similar to what we're using right now. But I think the pricing tiers are going to be probably pretty universal all the way across the board. You're going to pay for the time that you're using it, or the block of time that you're using it. In fact, out of everything you just said, I agree with everything, but I think that $1,000 is the ceiling of how much this should cost you. I think that you could get by with doing this for less than $100. You could do it with petty cash. This microphone, it looks really cool, but even that was only $100. Mm-hmm. A Yeti microphone is going to be about $100, and that's going to be a USB connection, and that will work with just about any computer hardware that you have. And so you don't need the soundboard, you don't need all the professional equipment. I feel like you need to have a decent camera, probably 720 or better, and those are not hard to get or inexpensive. And something I learned from you, Lex, is don't cut corners on sound. It has to sound good, or you're going to lose people, especially with so much of us living on headphones. If you have really bad audio, I've tuned out of things. No matter how good the content was, I've disconnected because it either hurt my ears or it hurt my head to try to understand what they were saying because the audio was so poor.
Totally agree. And Andy, you sound really crisp and great. So I am using these are from Amazon. They have a little mic. Does it sound okay compared to you guys? I mean, it's something. All right. So
yeah, I find it perfectly acceptable. Okay. I can hear a little bit of room noise, but it's not distracting whatsoever. I can even hear that it turns itself off when you're not talking. And so a lot of those voice activated microphones, like probably what you're using with your lavalier, Lex, this is the important points of technology that you need. You don't have to spend all the money you have in order to make it perfect.
And those are some of the tips that Lex shared on our podcast, we had a technology one as well, gave us links to all that. So I know we've got it out there for the members. I'm going to make that plug because Lex, you've given some great information. So I think people are applying it, and I feel like we're all becoming producers, not executive producers, but producers.
Right.
I have a question here. This is the nice thing about this too, is you can pull up, because we're streaming live to Facebook. A lot of the Facebook users are able to just make comments and ask questions. So here we have a question. What do you think of the Blue Yeti microphone? Well, Andy, I know you're very familiar with that microphone.
Yep. It's great. I was using one for a while before I picked up this guy, and I moved it along to a colleague that I was in calls with a lot. And I kind of did myself a favor by giving it to him. They're great. They're easy to come by. They make great sound. There are a lot of budding podcasters are starting with that before they build out into anything fancier. And they're usually about $100, $120, and you're going to get the same quality of sound as you're going to get with something that's $300, $400, $500.
Yeah. I think one of the things that people need to, the hardest thing of a podcast and the videos and the webinars is actually doing it. The costs
Right.
you'll find are nominal. It's the commitment to do it on a regular basis. Don't get dismayed. Don't get dismayed if you have a few attendees, because again, you make this up on the back end. You make it up on the replays. So if only a couple people watch your Zoom webinar, don't worry about it, because you could spin that around fairly quickly.
Right.
Got another question here from Facebook user. Would you get the Pro, Andy?
The Pro
Blue Yeti microphone.
I think no, I wouldn't get the Pro. I would get the basic introductory one, and the one qualifier that I would put to that is Blue Yeti is going to have 4 different audio environment settings, and so pay attention to that. And there's a lot of resources that Yeti provides to understand which setting you want to use, so that your audio is focused on you and not. If it's just you talking, then don't use the one that's going to pick up sound from every direction. Just make it to where it's picking up sound from you. And if that's not good enough, then start looking at the Yeti Pro. But I don't think you need to go there just yet. What do you think, Lex?
No, I think a Blue Yeti straight up is just good enough. I mean, one of the things that makes these cheap microphones, this lavalier, one of the reasons why I like it, because I could easily get a Blue Yeti. I could get the Rode that you have, but I've chosen this one just because the form factor is easy for me. I was using a headset before, but again, the quality, any way that you can get it, whether it's a Blue Yeti or a lavalier mic, people have different styles. I think that you're fine with not getting the Pro. You don't need to spend the extra money to get the Pro on that one.
And I'll even
go ahead.
I'll even qualify that one of the reasons that I have this and that I painted the walls and put some shelves up is it's theater. It doesn't make the content any better. It just presents better. It's the same thing with you, Lex. Those things behind you aren't there on accident. I know your office, and I see how things have moved around. A lot of it is theater. It doesn't add much to the content, but it makes the content more digestible.
Yeah.
So can we talk about lighting? Because I kind of joined today on the fly, so I don't have great lighting. Huge difference. So ring lights, or what do you guys suggest is like the low end to start with to get the proper lighting set up?
Go, Andy.
It's something that I've done is I've got a little bit of natural light in my environment coming from this direction, but right there, I just changed something on my monitor. I put if I'm a little darkened out, I'll bring up an Outlook screen or something to just shine white light in my face. Really, it's as low tech as that. I'll tell you what I don't like about ring lights is there's a little bit of light blindness that might come from it.
Agree. And then if I have these on, you get the reflection. It's like, oh, she's got a ring light on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the best advice actually came from Andy, and I've heard this a few places afterwards, was utilizing it. Most of us have 2 monitors now. Mm-hmm. And so if you position it properly, it actually serves as very good complementary lighting. If you have right now I have a lamp overview, and I've got 2 monitors facing me, and that kind of covers me pretty well at this point. So I think that's
a great idea.
Yeah. And it's everybody can do it. I would say that one thing that I've noticed a lot in terms of lighting, and I'll expand that out into cameras, is too much backlight will just turn you into a silhouette.
Yep.
And the position of your camera, I think, is also important. I think so many people it's shining up their nose, and you're looking at their ceiling or something, and it doesn't really take a whole lot of extra effort to make it right and to justify it, and make sure that you're sitting in the center of your camera, because as these Brady Bunch blocks start to move around, if you're off to the side, you might even disappear, because I might be in a 16:9 aspect ratio, and I'll be cut to a square, and half my face is cut off.
Good point. And gentlemen, speaking of Zoom, I have a Zoom to jump onto, so I'm going to log off. Thank you so much, Lex. Great to meet you, Andy. Thanks.
You as well, Suzanne.
Bye-bye.
All right, Andy. So I guess we're about 20 minutes, so let's start wrapping it up. But one of the other things I wanted to experiment more to was the DSLR. I know that Panasonic recently launched webcam software. So for the Lumix, some of the Lumix models, you're able to use them as webcams. I know Canon's done that for a while. GoPro has a module that, or a plugin that allows you to put software in, so you could use your GoPro as a webcam. All of those significantly better cameras than what come with your computer. I know for a lot of people that's the only option, but if you can, and me talking, because I'm definitely in that direction. I've tried it a few times. It's just hard to get into the workflow. You have to almost have a permanent setup that does that, because I'm doing work on this computer all day, and then all of a sudden I need to set up for a podcast. Well, I'd rather just do the podcast. I think this camera is good enough. But if I had a choice, or had a little bit more time to prepare for this particular one, I would have set up my GoPro. I would have set up a DSLR or something.
Yeah, I think every time you add layers of complexity, you run a risk of it kind of falling apart on you. I've tried all of those things too. Right behind me, right about there, you've got a little Lumix camera. I'm not quite pointing at it just right. There it is, right there. And I've tried to connect that up. It just wasn't quite new enough to qualify. So just because you have one of these brands that have created a pass-through doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily work for you. I've gone the route of connecting a iPhone as my webcam and to get a better picture quality there. But again, I have to add layers of complexity that make it not plug and play. And so I ended up, I would take it off and show you, but I can't, be like looking at your own eyes without a mirror. I would show you this 4K camera that I picked up. It's not the top of the line. I'm not getting 4K out of it, but it has that potential for pictures. And I just went ahead and spent the $120, I think it was, which I felt was a reasonable price compared to the other higher end webcams that can run $300, $400, $500.
Well, for next week's, I'm going to use a GoPro. So we're going to see how that works. My only problem is the software can be kind of janky. So if the computer wasn't configured to do the GoPro in the beginning, you'll find some conflicts. So we'll see how it works on that one.
I'll see if I can hook up something else that I have as a contrast point too that I can switch back and forth on.
Yeah, the thing I like about DSLRs is you get that nice little depth angle, which looks very professional. I mean, it really takes your video to a whole new level. The only complaints I've heard from that is potential latency. Especially in a live broadcast, you're dealing with a different part of different hardware there. That in some, well, no, it's all digital, but still, there's just more room for something to go wrong. So using a DSLR is a problem.
I think that's an important point to consider. We could get the best camera in the world, but essentially what we're doing is we're increasing the amount of data that we're sending to these platforms. And so that high quality video might actually interrupt audio. It might interfere with the bandwidth of a user trying to absorb all that information through through the aperture of their connection. So I don't know if there is a sweet spot, but there are sweeter spots, right?
Yeah. But the most important thing, I think we both got this, all three of us with Suzanne, is the sound. So for those of you who are putting together a streaming like this, don't get too caught up on the camera. It's important that you have at least like some of the fundamentals Andy talked about, where you're looking straight in. It's not looking up at you as much as possible, but it's the sound. So whether it's a cheap $30 lavalier that I'm using, or the really nice Rode setup that Andy has there, that's makes you look like a professional radio broadcaster. Or in Suzanne's case, she used a headset. A lot of people use those AirPods very effectively. You see in CNN and all those stations, people are being interviewed on AirPods. That's the thing you really need to focus on. Do not skimp on the sound.
Right. I'll tell you, on the topic of sound, something that I really played around a lot with was to reduce my room echo. And that's another reason why there is so much stuff behind me, is because it breaks up those echo points. And it's really hard to get yourself set up in a perfect space, but sometimes it's hanging blankets on walls, or creating a pillow fort just off your camera to break that up. I know a lot of radio broadcasters that are working from home are broadcasting from their closets just to get that room echo out.
Final question here that I think we can both take a crack at is to virtual backdrop or to not virtual backdrop. That's the question, because I think that I see it a lot. It looks iffy sometimes. I understand why people do it, because they don't want people to see their messy room. but is it really that much better? Oh, wait a minute, I got another question here from a user. So can Andy mention which Rode he has again?
Yeah, this is the Rode Pod Mic. It's a dynamic microphone, so it's going to need some phantom power. I just happen to have a soundboard that it plugs into. But Rode, I'm a brand loyalist to Rode, and they make some USB microphones that are just top notch. I think there's even a Rode Pod Mic that is has a USB interface. Otherwise, I think it's an NT1, something along those lines. But still, we're still only talking about the $100-ish range, and I find them to be nice quality. That's
and with the USB interface, you don't need
the arm.
You don't need a phantom power source for that, right? For the USB.
Not the USB ones, no. So unless you're building out a whole system, I would stick with the USB ones. Simplicity is always the best. The less moving parts you have, less mistakes you're going to make.
Yeah. This is USB too. I mean, I mean, it's not as good as Andy's, but it's good enough, and I think it works pretty well. But
yeah, you sound great.
Yeah. All right. So
can I comment on that? I find them to be very distracting because you have this halo effect that doesn't quite capture anything. I would only use those if you're in an embarrassing environment. If you're in an acceptable environment, you just want to kind of showcase your personality. I don't think you need to do that, but if you do, get a green screen background for your chair. I've seen those for sale. You just plug it into the back of your chair. It covers a 3 feet halo around you, and it makes that aura, your silhouette, that much more crisp.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion too. If you're going to do a virtual backdrop, do it right, and it's really not expensive. You can get a green screen backdrop for $30.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look on Amazon right now. They're not that expensive at all. You can have the one that pops up by itself, and it makes that virtual background pop. And again, it doesn't have that annoying breakthrough where all of a sudden you lost half of your head, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
at the very least, give yourself a solid color behind you without any other interruptions, and you'll be able to cut that down too.
Yeah. Just don't make it the same color as your shirt, because then
you'll do your floating head.
Yeah. So, well, all right, Andy, this was fun. I'm glad that Suzanne was able to join us. And for those of you watching, either the replay or the live feed, we are going to do this every week as much as we can, Andy. So, and we're going to stream it into the CSRA podcast or to the CSRA group. All the more reason to pay attention to the CSRA closed group. And then feel free to ask us any questions like you did here. We had a great handful of questions. Thank you all for asking some very good questions. And our goal is to cover a topic, and then we'll focus on that. And if you have any questions related to that, then we'll bring it up on the screen and we'll answer it. Yeah.
Do you think there will maybe we could, if we get enough questions post going live here that we can maybe address some of those at the beginning of next week?
Well, right now I think we answered them as well as they were going.
All right, cool.
So I put them up there each time. So,
all
right. Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you all for watching us. And until next week, have a great week.
Yeah. So long, Lex. So long, audience.